Let me tell you something that most men won't admit, not even to themselves. You can give someone 20 years of your life. You can pour yourself into a relationship with your entire being. Abandon your dreams, bury your desires, hold your tongue in every moment you wanted to scream, swallow every slight, every sarcastic smirk, every cold shoulder, every word left unsaid that still managed to cut you open. You can work day and night, take on the silent burdens, carry the weight of a home on your back, and never once ask for applause. You become the version of yourself that society told you to be: the rock, the fortress, the shield. You provide, you protect, you endure. You become the man who never complains. And then, just like that, it all vanishes. The life you built is no longer yours. You wake up one day alone in an empty apartment that echoes with memories and regret. Your children no longer within reach. Your bank account draining because the system demands payment for your loyalty, for your obedience, for your silence. That's not a rare tragedy, it's a common reality. It's happening to men every day. Men who followed the script. Men who believed that love meant sacrifice, that marriage was the next logical step, that building a family was the ultimate achievement. They told you it was noble. They told you it was right. They told you it would complete you, but they never told you the cost. They never told you that once the papers are signed, the game changes, and not in your favor. They never told you that modern marriage is a system where all the risk is yours to bear, and when it all falls apart, and it often does, it won't be her who pays the price. It won't be her who has to start over with nothing. It'll be you, because no one's coming to save you. There will be no sympathy, no outrage. Just that quiet, smug echo. You should have known better. They never told you how quickly love can become distance. How the woman who once clung to you with warmth can one day look at you like a stranger. They never warned you that respect can vanish without warning. That in this society, your role as a man is always conditional, never guaranteed, never secure. You don't just lose rights in a legal sense. You lose something deeper. Your sense of value, your respect, your place. Being a man in today's marriage means you are always under scrutiny. Every word is a risk. If you speak up, you're domineering. If you stay quiet, you're weak. If you express pain, you're a victim. If you stand your ground, you're controlling. There is no right move. You're in a rigged game. And the cruelest part? They've trained you to believe that it's your fault. So you internalize it. You keep pushing forward. You convince yourself that suffering in silence is strength, that taking it all on the chin is what a real man does. You ignore the knot in your chest. You suppress the sadness behind your eyes. You hide your exhaustion behind responsibility. Because if you break, who else will hold it together? And deep down, you believe this is what love is supposed to feel like: weighty, draining, unbalanced. Because no one ever showed you anything else. You sit at the dinner table with someone who barely speaks to you anymore. You sleep next to a woman who critiques your every move, who questions your decisions, who undermines you in front of your children. And you stay. Not because it's right, but because you've been taught that leaving makes you a failure. That walking away means you gave up. So you endure. You wake up every morning and keep grinding. You go to work. You pay the bills, you fix the leaking faucet, you replace the tires. You hold the family together with invisible threads. And still, no one sees you. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize. You don't have to keep playing. You don't have to stay in a game that is designed for you to lose. You don't have to sacrifice your mental health, your peace, your identity just to keep a broken idea alive. You can step back. You can choose yourself. You can say, enough. Because what's at stake isn't just a relationship. It's your soul, your very sense of being. Your ability to wake up and feel like a man, not some depleted version of yourself constantly shrinking to fit into someone else's mold. You see, modern marriage isn't what it used to be. It's not sacred. It's not balanced. It's not about two people growing together through life's storms. It's a contract built on legalities and loopholes where you assume full liability. And if the wind shifts, you're the one left holding the rubble. And don't think for a second that justice is on your side. Because when the system gets involved, it won't be looking for fairness. It'll be looking for precedent, for statistics, for ways to expedite the process. You are not a man in their eyes. You are a file. a case, a paycheck. She can accuse you of anything without proof. And while you spend sleepless nights finding lawyers, fighting for access to your own children, holding your dignity together with fraying threads, she walks away with the narrative, the sympathy, the social circle. They believe her story. You're left alone with the burden of being painted as the villain in a life where you once were the hero, and no one rushes to help you. There are no shelters for broken men, no safe spaces for fathers who were pushed out, no campaigns for husbands left behind, just silence, just shame. And this destruction, it doesn't happen with explosions. It starts with the quiet, with subtle shifts, with eye rolls, with decisions made without you, with your own children learning without a word that you no longer command the same respect, that somehow, even they know, you've become the background character in a life you built. And yet you carry on, because that's what you've been taught, that a real man carries the weight, no matter how heavy, that endurance is proof of strength, that staying is honorable. But there's a point where endurance becomes decay, a point where silence isn't noble, it's self-destruction. And too many men are crossing that line without even realizing it. They don't scream, they don't cry, they just fade, slowly, quietly. They become shadows of who they were. They drink more, they sleep less, they stop laughing, they stop dreaming. They drag themselves through a life that feels more like a sentence than a journey. And no one notices, no one asks, no one stops the world for a man who's falling apart inside. And the cruelest irony of it all? When you finally collapse, when the pain catches up and you can't fake it anymore, the same society that demanded your silence, your strength, your stability, now tells you that you're to blame. That you weren't man enough. That you didn't do enough. That you broke because you were weak. But no, you didn't break because you were weak. You broke because you carried more than anyone should have to carry, and you did it without complaint. You gave everything. And in return, you were left empty. Not because you failed, but because the system was never built to nourish you. It was built to use you until you had nothing left. And that's why you need to hear this now, before you become another statistic. Before you reach the point of no return. You can choose something else. You can walk away from the roles that suffocate you. You can rebuild from a place of truth instead of performance. You can reclaim what's been slowly taken from you. Your voice, your dignity, your life. Because you are not here to be disposable. You are not here to carry everyone else's expectations until you vanish. You are not here to disappear quietly. You are here to live in not as a version of what they expect, but as a man who finally chooses himself. And now, the real question begins to echo in the hollow spaces left behind by everything you've lost. What do you do after the collapse? When the house is gone, the relationship dead, the connection with your children reduced to scheduled visits and cold exchanges. When you're no longer the provider, no longer the anchor, no longer the man who once held it all together, how do you rebuild? Most men never learn how to rise again because no one ever taught them how to exist outside of what they were trained to be. Dependable, dutiful, silent. You spent so many years sacrificing, adapting, shrinking, becoming what others needed that now, in the absence of those roles, you don't even recognize yourself. You look in the mirror and see a man with potential still buried beneath layers of betrayal, exhaustion, and suppressed anger. But that version of you, the one before the compromise, the one before the mask, he's not gone. He's waiting, not for permission, not for approval, but for your decision to finally choose yourself over the illusion. Because here's the raw truth. No one is going to hand you back your power. You have to take it. And that starts with confronting the harshest reality of all that you've been betrayed, not just by her, not just by the system, but by the conditioning that told you your value as a man came from how much you could tolerate. You were taught that love is proven through sacrifice, that masculinity is proven through suffering. But that's not strength, that's submission to a narrative designed to keep you useful, not free. And until you break that narrative, until you burn it down and rewrite it from the ashes, you will keep building your life on foundations meant to collapse. You were never meant to be a slave to peacekeeping. You were meant to lead your life and not survive it. So now comes the reckoning. You stop chasing closure from the people who destroyed you. You stop waiting for apologies that will never come. You stop negotiating with a system that sees you only as a function, not a human. And you start rebuilding from the inside out. You create structure not for others, but for yourself. Discipline not to earn love, but to reforge your will. You wake up and make promises to yourself and keep them. Not to impress anyone, not to prove your worth, but to reclaim it. Because the moment you stop seeking validation and start demanding alignment, everything changes. The world stops looking like a battlefield and starts becoming a proving ground. And the fire returns. Slowly, but it does. The version of you that used to dream, to move with conviction, to speak without fear, he begins to emerge from beneath the rubble. Not naive this time. Not soft. Hardened. Focused. Wise. You begin to understand that real power doesn't come from being needed, it comes from being independent. Real respect isn't about being liked, it's about being unapologetically firm in your boundaries. You stop performing for love. You start requiring it to meet your standard. And those who can't rise to it, they fall away. And you let them. Without resentment, without pleading, because your energy is no longer for sale. And something else happens. The more you choose yourself, the more others notice. Not because you're trying to be seen, but because masculine presence doesn't need to be it resonates. It speaks in silence. It moves through a room without explanation. You stop arguing, defending, justifying. You stop explaining your value. You simply become a man so anchored, so clear, so unshakable, that everything not built on truth cannot remain in your presence. And that includes women. Because you no longer chase affection, you demand alignment. You no longer tolerate emotional chaos as the price of love. You no longer settle for relationships that drain you just so you won't be alone. You welcome solitude, not as isolation but as sacred ground where you sharpen your edge, redefine your path, and cultivate the kind of clarity that most men are too afraid to face. And when you do choose to love again, it's not from desperation, it's from abundance. You don't love because you need her. You love because you chose Heron. She meets you where you are, not where you used to hide. You bring structure, you hold the frame. You don't try to control her, you don't need to. You lead, not with fear, but with certainty. And she either rises into that container with feminine grace or she fades. Because you will never again allow chaos into your kingdom, not when you've fought this hard to reclaim it. This is where freedom begins. Not in escaping the world, but in mastering your role within it. Not in walking away from responsibility, but in defining which responsibilities you will carry and which you will burn to the ground. You stop letting guilt guide your decisions. You stop living for people who only love you when you're useful. You start living by a standard that reflects the man you've become, the one they tried to tame. You don't seek comfort, you seek clarity. You don't chase happiness, you cultivate meaning. And the deeper you go into that path, the more dangerous you become, because you hurt others, but because you can no longer be manipulated. You become the man who can walk away from disrespect, from emotional manipulation, from systems that profit off your obedience, from relationships that drain more than they give. You become a man with options, not just in women, but in life. Because now, everything you build is on your terms. Every boundary is enforced. Every decision is rooted in self-respect. You don't wait for the world to recognize your value. You move like a man who already knows it. And in the end, that's the greatest revenge. Not bitterness, not destruction, but elevation. You become everything they said you couldn't be after they left you broken. You become ungovernable, unshakable, unapologetically masculine. Not by becoming harder, but by becoming real. Because real men don't play by rules that were never written for their survival. Real men rewrite the script. And they do it with fire in their chest, steel in their spine, and silence in their steps.